Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started and welcome
Okay.
folks to our presentation by Sandra Siebert, who is one of our experienced master gardeners, and she's going to just, I love this title, Sandra, It Ain't Over Yet. So this is all about planning and planting your fall garden and possibly into the winter as well. So take it away, Sandra.
Okay. Well, I guess the first question you're all going to want to know is why start in the fall? Why do it all over in the fall? Did you see the screen change, Sean?
I did, yes. Yes.
Okay,
Beautiful.
okay. Because both of us disappeared, so, okay. So why garden in the fall? Well, there are several reasons why you want to garden in the fall. You get a second chance to do the spring vegetables over. That, you know, if you planted kale and it didn't work out for you in the spring, you can plant it again in the fall. You can get additional production. This is particularly good if you're if you've got a small garden and you want as much of certain things as possible. So you can double your production, maybe even more with a fall garden. And some vegetables just taste better when they mature in cool weather. And some of them also grow much better when it's cooler. Those are all of the cabbage and mustard family. They do better when it's cooler, and they taste better when it's cooler. Also, many root crops like carrots, beets, turnips, they get sweeter if they're maturing in cool weather. And all of these vegetables also frequently taste much better after they've had some freezing temperatures. Someone told me once that it's because sugar is their antifreeze. So when they get some freezing, really cold and mildly freezing temperatures, they produce a lot of sugar to keep them going. Also, it starts getting cooler eventually, I hope, and it's nicer to be out in the garden. And eventually the pest pressure decreases. So what can you grow? Well, you can grow all of this and many other things. Lettuces and kale, all of your leafy greens, anything with a short season. This is tatsoi, which is a nice Asian green that is a short season, and I was told will stay good to quite low temperatures. Radishes. I love my fall crops of radishes are always the best. And especially if you want daikons, those long white root ones, and purple daikons. And carrots and beets, cabbages, of course kale, and there's more carrots, beets, and a daikon. And this is some mustard and lettuce. And beans. Snap beans won't hold over until, after frost, your snap beans are gone. But the bush beans are short enough season that you can start planting them next month in July and have several plantings, and you can get more beans. Oh, well, you aren't going to plant tomatoes or an eggplant for a fall garden, but a lot of your summer vegetables like the tomatoes, eggplant, summer squash, and that will continue to produce until it freezes. So some of the challenges of fall gardening are kind of tough, but you can overcome them with a little bit of planning. One of the first things is the weather. it's hot. It's hot now. It's hot for gardeners and it's hot for plants. And a lot of the spring vegetables that you will be planting in fall will have trouble germinating and growing when the soil is hot. So what you need to do is cool the soil. Plan out where you might be planting your fall garden. And even if there's something that's growing there right now, you can put a heavy layer of mulch over it and water it just to cool it down. And that will keep it cooler. You can also plant a cover crop there, which you will have to take out before you plant your fall garden. But that will also, anything that shades the soil will keep it cooler so that it's not 100 degrees when you're trying to plant little seeds or cabbage transplants. So this is a way that you can help once you get your things transplanted in there or get some little guys going, you can use shade cloth to reduce the amount of sunlight that is hitting the things. I've got some shade cloth over my cabbages right now until I can get them all taken care of, because when it turned really hot, they all kind of looked like a bunch of bald heads out there getting beaten by the sunlight. And when you're planting seeds in the soil, when it's hot and dry especially, one trick is to lay a board over the seed row after you've planted your seeds. You plant your seeds, water them good, and lay just a regular 2x4 or something similar over the row for a while. That will keep it cooler, keep it moist, and you will need to check it every day or two so that you can remove it when the little seedlings come up. But I've done that with carrots, which are particularly difficult to start when you can't keep it moist. And it worked really nicely. So water is a critical thing especially when it's hot and dry. You're going to need to water pretty frequently when everything is new. Soaker hoses and drip lines make the job easier. So I have a bunch of soaker hoses and I just lay them out as I'm planting. So that way it's easy once the little plants are at a stage where I want to use a soaker hose on them instead of just a shower from a watering wand. They're already there and I don't have to work around the plants and maybe damage the plants while I'm doing it. And when you plant your seeds or your little transplants, what you want to do is water them pretty frequently. I will go out with a shower head on my hose and water any seed beds every single day, maybe twice a day, maybe 3 times a day if it's really hot. And having things shaded a little bit, just a really light layer of mulch over even a seed bed will help slow the loss of moisture and make it more likely that your seeds will germinate and grow. Another big challenge with fall gardening are pests. These little guys are always around, but I didn't have any good photos of things like the cabbage worms and stuff. But that's also a doable challenge because after a period of time, the pest pressure reduces. As the weather cools, you don't get as many pests. This is one way that I reduce pest pressure on my fall gardens and on my spring gardens, which also gives some protection from the elements like wind and heavy rain, even hail. I've had hail punch holes in this row cover, floating row cover, but it slows the fall of the hail and protects the plants. But this is the way, particularly with flying insects, like the cabbage white butterflies. They won't be able to get through this and lay their eggs. But you do have to check routinely, especially when you're having to plant something fairly early. One year I planted a bunch of Brussels sprouts and put row cover over them so I wouldn't get the cabbage whites and the other little moths and butterflies laying their eggs. And when I finally opened it up, a bazillion little brown grasshoppers had hatched out and were eating my Brussels sprouts. So you have to check. And sometimes aphids can be an issue under the row cover, but if you check routinely and take care of them when you just start seeing a few, which usually just you spray them off, just get the hose and a little spray thing and just spray them off, and you can keep them under control if you keep after them. But as I said, and this is the interior of my little tunnels. This would be spring because I wouldn't plant onions in the fall, but this is how you can see the PVC pipe. I just bend it over and lay the row cover over that. You can also spray for pests. I have a little 1 gallon sprayer and I use BTK, which is a toxin from a specific species of bacteria, and it is only toxic to members of the moth and butterfly family and only damages the ones that actually eat a plant that's been sprayed with it. You still want to be cautious with it, but if you spray once a week, it's very effective at controlling all those little moths and butterflies that come along and want to eat the cabbage family. And really, plants like kale and cabbage and the mustards, those are the main ones that I have pest difficulties with. The carrots and other things, not so much. Sometimes there'll be something that will eat them a little bit, but it's mainly the cabbage family, cabbage and mustard family, that I have pest issues with at any time of year, except beets and beans and peas and some other things are really tasty to rabbits, and so I put up temporary fences around the things that they really like. And you need to get it up pretty quickly, because once I had to replant beets a few times until I learned that I needed to put my rabbit fence up. And so one question is when to plant. And this handy little page is in the K-State Gardening Guide, which you can download from the KSRE bookstore. You can download it for free, and it's got all kinds of handy information, plus this little page, which the white part is telling you when to plant, and the black part tells you when you can expect to harvest. And I use this. You'd think I'd have it all memorized by now, but I use it all the time. And I also have calendars that I write down when I plant things and when I plan to plant things. And that way I can go back each year and refresh my memory. And that way, if I know last year I had a dismal failure with something because the weather got really cold too soon or something like that, then I have a record that I can tweak my planting dates with. I also have a journal where I try to record how much of stuff that I've planted and what varieties. At least I record how many transplants I have. But like I said, next month you can start planting beans, and next month is when you'll start planting some other things. Late July, you can do beets. About mid-July, you can start putting in your cabbage transplants. You can also start planting carrots and broccoli transplants, cauliflower transplants, and you can do a fall crop of potatoes if you can find seed potatoes anywhere in late this month and into late July. Many of the other things you won't plant until August or even September. This guide says that you only plant kale in like the first 3 weeks of August, but I've had good crops of kale planting it around the 1st of September. And really tender things like lettuce and radishes and spinach and stuff, mid to late August and early to mid September are the best times. I usually don't plant most of those until September. And my daikons I usually plant around the 1st of September, and I get really nice crops of those. So fall planting is pretty much like spring planting. You can do direct sowing, which is putting the seed directly into the soil in the garden. And like I said, you want to cool your soil. You want to have it at least cooler than 100 degrees Fahrenheit before you start planting, because a lot of these things just will not germinate in really hot soils. Like most things, it has to be at least below 100 degrees, but the optimum range for most plants is 75 degrees to 85 degrees, especially on the low end for these spring and fall vegetables. And transplants. I do a lot of transplants in the spring and the fall. One of the challenges with fall gardening is it's very difficult to find plants. You can't just go to the local nursery and find cabbage plants to plant in the fall unless it's something they've held over from the spring or something like that. But it's pretty easy to start your own. Seed is cheap, and it's pretty easy to find what you need to start your own transplants. You don't have to buy plastic pots and plastic trays. I also have some old cat litter boxes that I put to set my transplant pots in. You can just save pots that you've bought other plants in to use, and it's really use what you can. You just want to make sure that your pots have drainage holes. And I've kind of changed the way I start my little transplants. I used to think I had to get the soil moist before I put it in the little pots. But how I do that is I just fill the pot with soil. I put in my seed, then I spritz the top of the soil really well with a spray bottle and put it in a leak-proof container, like one of these black plastic trays or a cat litter box, and cover it either with something clear, or you can cover it with something dark. I use something clear for what I'm going to grow as transplants. And then every day, once or twice a day, you spritz the top of the soil again. And when the little green pea things start coming up. Once they're about half an inch tall or so, I put water in a leak-proof bottom tray and let it water from the bottom. And I just water from the bottom. I've had really good luck with that, sometimes better luck than what I usually do. And it's a lot easier to set it up when I don't have to get the soil all moist. And another reason for that's to start planning and even working on your fall garden right now is you want to make sure you have the seed you need, because sometimes seed disappears, especially from places like Walmart, and that you can't find it in the stores. But usually the nurseries will continue to carry seed into the fall, and you might need to order some seed. So you want to give yourself time to get your seed in place. And because if you're doing cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, some of those longer season things, you will need to start them this month. You'll plant them out at the end of July or early August, but you'll need to start them I'm going to start my cabbages and my broccoli plants next week, probably. And if you don't want to buy a bunch of little plastic pots, this is the way to go. You can make little pots from newsprint, and they're biodegradable, so you don't even have to take your transplants out to put them in the ground. And this is how you can do that. You take some newspaper that's 12 by 22 inches and a 16-ounce can, and you fold the newspaper lengthwise, wrap it around the can so that the top of the can is 2 inches from the cut edge, and use that as the bottom. So you fold that cut edge in for the bottom of your little pot. Then you remove the can from in your newspaper around and fold the top edge down again, fold it inside. This makes it a little more sturdy. And then you fill it with your soil and plant your seeds, and there you go. I don't know how that works with the bottom watering method because I haven't done that yet. So anyway, and here's some of my little seedling that I started one year. And you plant them out under with the hoops already set up. And this also shows one way that I help protect my plants when it gets cold, is besides having a heavier type of row cover that I put over the tops of the hoops, I also put some more inside to put directly over the top of the plants. This gives them just a couple more degrees of protection, and it works. And eventually it's going to get cold. And that's one of the challenges of fall gardening, is you don't really know when it's going to get really cold. But you can still get some great vegetables. If you want season extension, here's a way to do season extension. You can get this thick clear plastic and drape it over the hoops that you had up for your row cover. And I also have some of the row cover inside to throw over them for extra protection. And you'd be surprised how many degrees that will increase. I've had, if it's above 40 degrees, you're going to have to vent a plastic tunnel like this, because I had a thermometer sensor inside one of them one year, and if it was above 40, it would be in the 90s under the plastic tunnel. but I don't. And it's much trickier to anchor the edges of the plastic than it is the row cover because the plastic will slip. So I use a lot more rocks on the edges of the plastic than I do. I try to wrap the plastic a little bit around some scrap lumber or some lengths of rebar, and then put lots of rocks on top of it. Other people some people use sandbags, but this way I don't have to buy anything. I don't do the low tunnels, the plastic tunnels. By the time it's getting too cold for anything to stay under my, just the heavier row cover, which is also called a frost blanket, I'm done. But this is a way that I tried to go a little deeper into the winter one year, painted some buckets black and filled them with water. And I strung these Christmas lights that have the big bulbs on them underneath and lit them up like at night when it would be a little cooler. A friend of mine told me that it worked really well for her. So I tried it a couple of years, I think, but it's kind of tricky to put up, and so I have not ever done that again. But it's a concept that you can use if you wish to go, especially if you have a much smaller garden than I do. It's a way you can push the production of like lettuces and some of those things a little deeper into the winter, and it looks cool at night. And so it just keeps getting colder. And this is another way that I add another layer of protection when it's going to be a little extra cold. I will do this when I've just got the row cover over it too. If it's a little colder than I want it, then I think my cabbages or something can handle and I'm not ready to harvest, I'll even throw blankets on over top of them inside sometimes. But this helps give me just a few more degrees. It's not going to keep it down to like 10 degrees or anything like that, but it gives me just a little bit more time. And so there you have it. That's everything you need to know, maybe, about doing a fall garden. And if you follow these steps and you are diligent about watering and taking care of them, then you too can have an abundant fall harvest. That's the end. It looks like I've still got a lot of time for questions.
No, this is very fascinating. I can't get over your your creativity in coming up with all these various solutions. This is wonderful.
Well, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are, K-State has a publication about fall vegetable gardens, and there are a lot of resources to help you out, and other gardeners. Talk to other gardeners who do this. Some of it requires a little cost up front, but like with the shade cloth, that you can use that for years and years and years and years. And if you're careful, you can get a few seasons out of your row cover. And when my row cover starts getting a little too torn up to be a good insect barrier, I just use it as the extra protection underneath the low tunnel. And the plastic, if you're careful with it, you can use that for several years too. And you can do repairs on it. I use a clear plastic waterproof packing tape to repair the plastic that I put over the low tunnels. And I use duct tape for temporary repairs on my on my row cover. So
Right.
I extend things a little bit, but you know, with a little bit of upfront cost, you can, especially it's not so bad when you've got a smaller garden. I mean, I have hundreds of hundreds of feet of row for that I'm planting every year. But if somebody with a few 4x8 beds, it's not going to be that much of an issue.
So you must be eating fresh greens all winter long.
Not fresh greens, because once it gets so cold, I have to go to more heroic measures to keep things going. We just clear cut everything, but I'm eating produce from the garden pretty much all winter long, because we have multiple deep freezes that we put away all this stuff in.
It's incredible. So do you have a root cellar?
No, we wish we did, but we had made plans of various things that we could do to get a little bit of cold storage, but it's never manifested.
Okay. But so how do you store like carrots and beets and the radishes and whatnot? I mean, and you know, how and where, how long?
Those radishes in particular will keep for quite a long time in the refrigerator, and carrots as well, and beets as well. But I also will, if I just have way too much and it's going to be difficult to get through them, I mean, they'll last for a couple months. I mean, if I'm pulling them in September, I'm pulling them in like late September, October, even November, and they keep for a month or two. So I'm able to eat them at least through December that way. But I can also cook them and freeze them, steam up carrots and put them in the freezer. By December, I'm probably eaten down some of this other produce from the freezer, and so I've got a little more space. And radishes, they're really good cooked, especially the daikons. We roast them, we steam them, and just throw them into dishes with other vegetables like curries and stir fries, and they're really good that way, and they're very nutritious. So
yes,
and beets as well.
Beets.
Yeah, fermenting is another way, but you have to keep that in the refrigerator. I made some really great kimchi-like ferment last fall from purple daikons, and that was really good.
So I was really struck by again the attention you need to pay to temperature, both heat, in July when you want to start another planting, and then the cold, in November, December. So I was and you're various solutions on how to cool the soil. I mean, I hadn't thought about cooling the soil, that the soil gets to, can get over to 100 degrees, and that that seeds, fall seeds can't tolerate that. So I was also curious to know, you talked about like a shade cloth, but it looked to me like it was, again, a lightweight cloth. I'm wondering if you used an actual shade cloth that's like more solid. Do you know what I mean? Like just a plain old solid.
The shade cloth that I use is, I mean, it's something that is specifically made to provide a little shade for in gardens and on farms. So it is a plastic kind of mesh thing, and you can get them in some different shadings. 30%, it blocks 30% of sunlight, or I've got one that blocks 50% of the sunlight. And the heavier one I use on tender things like lettuce, and the 30% one is on the cabbages and that kind of thing. So, but keeping the soil cool is another reason, like from my last presentation, you don't ever leave the soil uncovered because you want to keep it cooler. Even for like your tomatoes and stuff, at some point the soil will get so hot it will be detrimental to them as well. So you want to keep it covered.
Yeah. Da, 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 da. Oh, so oh, go ahead.
Okay. Another thing I forgot to mention was nutrition for your fall plants. K-State recommends that you put in a fertilizer. Let's see, what did they say? A low analysis all-purpose fertilizer, like starting with a couple, 3 weeks after you put your transplants in, and then when your direct sown things start, after your direct sown things start coming in. But all I do is I just prepare the fall garden like I do the spring garden. I just add some more compost, and
that's what I was thinking, like a compost tea or something too, you know?
Yeah. And you can do that. I've done that. I've done that. I've done some things that some people might find kind of weird to fertilize my plants, but yeah, compost tea is definitely
like
good.
The fish emulsion watered down. Do you use that?
I've used fish emulsion and kelp, liquid kelp. So yeah, you can use those things.
Okay.
And there are some homemade ones you can use, but I won't go into that right now.
So speaking of temperature, does that mean that you have thermometers in every single row cover house?
Oh no, I just did that 1 year to see what it does.
So how do you know the temperature? I mean, do you have like a separate temperature you just bring with you to you know, and wait and see what because I'm just asking how you make decisions about when you need to add extra blankets or when you need to remove.
I just look at the forecast, and if they say it's going to be 22, I say, okay, tonight I'm going to put a little extra cover on some of my plants. Most things under that frost blanket row cover, they'll, like the cabbages and stuff, they'll be fine if it gets down to 22 because they can tolerate down to 25 without any extra protection. So, and also I have found, I don't know where I have it, but I have found resources that tell you how low you can go when something will sometimes, you know, these lowest temperatures the plant will survive. It will suffer some damage, but some of these plants can go to pretty low temperatures without protection and still be alive. You can maybe use the heart of it rather than the outer leaves. And another thing with fall gardening is there are some things like spinach. If you get spinach going pretty good, you can just a little mulch and it will hold through winter. And you get more production from spinach that is wintered over than you do from spring planted spinach, because it doesn't matter how late you plant your spring spinach, it's going to bolt at the same time the older stuff will. And I have literally weighed the difference between fall sown spinach that has wintered over and spring sown spinach, and the fall sown spinach that wintered over vastly outproduced even longer row of the spring sown spinach.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. Huh. And sometimes kale will winter over. I've had it happen accidentally a couple of times, but when I've made an attempt to do it. It didn't work. So that's an iffy proposition. And another thing you can, if somebody with the spring, I said that any of the spring vegetables that have short seasons can be sown in the fall. One thing I wouldn't even try is peas.
Really?
K-State,
Okay.
yeah. K-State says if you really want to try peas, to do snow peas,
Ah,
but peas just cannot adapt to the hot temperatures. I love snap peas, and I've tried doing snap peas as a fall production. And I was lucky to get like a handful.
Yeah.
And so my thing is, I'm not going to tell you not to try it. I'm just going to say, don't have great expectations.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of long-term plants, I remember being surprised that my parsley wintered over.
Yes. Yes. It's a biennial. And if
Yeah.
it's not crowded and in the perfect spot, it will winter over. But I have had it winter over a number of years, and then I just can't get it to do that again. I'm not sure why.
Yeah. So what are some other examples of herbal kinds of plants? I'm thinking of like rosemary and
Okay.
lavender. I mean, lavender is a hot season plant, correct?
Yeah, so is rosemary. Rosemary, you have to plant as an annual here.
Okay.
A cooler season herbs are cilantro.
Ah, okay.
And I've had cilantro, like just out in the open, staying green, not really growing much, but staying green to really, really deep temperatures in the winter. So, that's a good one for fall planting. You have to, you have to wait a little bit. I always have cilantro that goes to seed, and I don't collect all of the seed or anything. And so when that seed that fell from my spring sown plants starts to sprout, then I can plant more cilantro. Or you can also put it under the row cover with some of your other plants, like with the cabbages and kale and stuff. Dill also is a nice cool season herb if you like dill.
Mm-hmm.
It's another one like cilantro that it self-sows so rampantly, I don't ever bother to plant it. And I've had it, just like a little carpet of baby dill, and it has that gray green, and it's got that really delicate ferny foliage.
Yeah.
And when you go out in the morning and there's dew on it, it is just so precious.
What about fennel? Is fennel similar to dill in terms of being a cool season crop?
Fennel is something that I've tried to grow, the bulbing fennel, and it does like cooler temperatures, and I've tried doing it as a fall crop. I haven't had great success with getting those great big fennel bulbs, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I'm planting a variety that is supposed to be a bulbing fennel, but I just haven't, no matter when I plant it, I haven't gotten the big, huge bulbs. It needs a lot of water to bulb, so you have to keep it moist. But you can plant fennel and just use the foliage to season with it. So planting it when it's cool for a cooler season crop, you're still going to get something that you can use. I've got some bronze fennel that just keeps going and going and going. And I like to snip off the leaves and chop them up into salads. It makes a really nice little pop in my salads.
Yeah, yeah. I pretty much grow them for the caterpillars, the black swallowtail.
Yeah, and that's another thing. That's mainly the thing. I was weeding a small bed that had carrots and lettuce and leeks and celery and stuff in it, and after I had mowed down all this dill that was popping up in it, I kept finding this little swallowtail larva. So I take it over here. You can have this over here.
So how long can you make a batch of, or patch, I should say, of potatoes? So you plant those in the fall, and then how long can you keep harvesting, or would you still have, because I'm just wondering, you know, the ground's going to freeze pretty soon. So then,
Yes, I am not sure. I have never done potatoes in the fall. K-State has a nice little publication on growing potatoes that could answer some of those questions if you're really interested in potatoes.
Okay.
But yeah, don't ask me. I've got potatoes in the garden that I planted this spring, and I'm going, we'll see whether I can actually get potatoes, because I haven't grown them for so long
okay.
that I don't really know that much about them,
Yeah.
especially for fall.
I'm just thinking of so many other, you know, varieties of again, vegetables and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm. Radish, okay, I've got radishes and carrots and turnips and all of those root vegetables.
yeah,
You can hold pretty deep into the winter if you put a heavy layer of mulch around them,
okay.
so that the ground does not freeze under that layer for a long while. Eventually it will, but you can harvest pretty deep into the winter if you just put in, and the tops will die back, but the roots will still be good as long as the ground doesn't freeze.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what a treat it would be having your own root crops for Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, that would be easy, because the ground isn't going to be frozen by then anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah. That would be pretty easy to have all kinds of fresh produce from the fall garden for Thanksgiving.
And that's part of why I was thinking potatoes as well, you know, carrots and
yeah, I would have to, okay, that little slide that I have.
Exactly. That was great with when to plant, which crops. It's so handy.
It says, okay, it says that your harvest time for potatoes that are planted late June to late July would be to start harvesting about late September and into late October.
Wow, okay.
I don't know how well it would work to do the same mulching method with them. I'm guessing that eventually it would be too cold for potatoes in the ground, just whether the soil is frozen or not. I don't know. The species that we plant did hail from the Andes, and I don't know how cold it gets there, but.
Well, that's another question. If you choose particular seeds from, again, like the Andes, from you know, if you use different kinds of seeds for cool season planting from different countries that might have a longer lifespan, you know, in the colder weather.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why the cabbage and mustards are good, because I mean, places like Ireland, cabbage is like a mainstay, or at least used to be, and kale as well, Ireland and Scotland. And those, they don't get as cold as we do, but they have but they don't have hot temperatures, and they're cold for quite a bit of the year.
Trying to read my notes here. Yeah, I just marvel at keeping in mind the temperature of the soil, temperature of the air, how much water, when you water, and you know, and again, how long things can extend. For some reason, I'm thinking rhubarb. That's a completely different.
Yeah, rhubarb,
Yeah,
I don't think,
that's, you plant it once and that's.
yeah, yeah. And I can't even get it to grow very well, just
You know,
for a regular season. So I don't know how you would
I have
even.
the same problem. What is it with rhubarb? Why won't it? I know it's like a tuber, correct? And I've tried it 2 or 3 times and I just could not make it stick. Does it need crappy soil?
No, it needs relatively rich, moderately rich soil. Someone told me once that rhubarb would benefit from some shade in this kind of weather. I don't think it likes it really hot,
Okay.
but I'm not sure. I keep hearing that rhubarb is difficult to grow in Kansas.
Yeah, I guess so. Jeez. Wow.
I think K-State has a publication on growing rhubarb, but
Okay.
even that says it's not easy.
I think I probably checked it trying to figure out, what's the trick, but maybe, yeah, I guess I wonder if it's the humidity maybe.
I have no idea. I know that I planted rhubarb one year in a bed that's a little just that's down below at the bottom of our hill, so it's kind of tricky to get to. And I had wonderful rhubarb a couple of years, and then I transplanted it up by the house where I could take care of it better. It doesn't do much.
It's crazy. Yeah. So in terms of, again, all the different kinds of leafy greens, have you experimented with different cultivars of lettuce and, cabbage and kale to see which ones work best or?
I've experimented. My favorite kale to grow, period, is red Russian, also called ragged jack, because it does well. It germinates well, and it does well both as a spring and a fall crop. Lacinato does pretty well. I planted that too, although I usually put that in as a transplant just because it gets bigger and taller and does better with a little better spacing. I've tried some different varieties of kale, and I just like these two best. But there's also white Russian, and there's different leafy green. Kale, red Russian kale and the white Russian kale are kind of a different breed of kale. They're called a Siberian kale. So I'm guessing they can handle a little more extreme temperatures. And lettuces are there are like thousands of varieties of lettuces. John, you look at the list of lettuces in a catalog and look at the pictures and you just get so excited. Oh, I want that one and that one and that one. And some of them do better in heat than others. And some of them do better in really colder. You just read the descriptions in the catalog of what they are. I have of the romaines, I have one variety called Jericho, which is more heat tolerant, and then another variety of romaine called Winter Density, which is more cold tolerant. So just read the descriptions and see where they fall on the spectrum.
Well, that's really handy that the catalogs and the, will give you those kinds of directions to suggest which cultivars would, work best in the heat.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes the descriptions are pretty,
well,
skeletal, but
right.
I just say, if you want to experiment with different lettuces, just go at it, because there's so many different varieties. Sure. I think I grow a couple of varieties called Salad Bowl. There's a green one and a red one. They're like an oak leaf lettuce, is what the type of lettuce they are, and they do pretty well. That's kind of my standard leaf lettuce, because it just germinates so readily and grows pretty well.
Right. I mean, I know that you obviously are doing this with row covers in separate spaces,
Mhm.
but I was wondering too about, for example, kale. People talk about just planting some kale or planting a cabbage in their flower bed, just tucking it
Right.
in clean stuff. So I'm just curious to know then, how do you figure out again temperatures and if something needs to be covered or not, like if and when a cabbage might need to be covered in some way, like maybe with a pot or something, for one night. I mean, I'm just curious.
I just know that cabbages can withstand at least the upper 20s
Wow.
with no problem.
Okay.
And so if it's going to get colder, like I said, you just look and see, try to find some resource that will tell you. I just do a web search for lowest temperatures for this vegetable,
Okay.
and you can find that, and then that will help you know when you really need to cover it. But I would say anytime it's going to drop lower than the upper 20s, almost anything is going to need to be, if you want it to come through unscathed,
Right.
that almost anything's going to need a little bit of extra protection. But it's sometimes surprising the temperatures things will tolerate.
Well, as we know, there's so many microclimates, right? And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that would be a whole other
And
variable in your yard to try and figure out, what's a sheltered place that, might not, get it,
right.
feel as cold, get as cold.
And that's what you're doing with the row cover and the shade cloth and everything, is you're creating microclimates that are a little different than what's
Exactly.
around them.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has all been so fascinating, Sandra. Thank you so very much for all this information. It gets the brains turning about how, as you say, that you can continue your growing season for so long. It's
Yeah.
wonderful, and I really admire you for all the again the years that you've been doing this to really extend your vegetable productions.
Yeah. Well,
So if there's nothing else, I will again thank you so very much, and thank folks for viewing, and happy fall gardening. Take care,
bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.